We're joined live by Greens Senator from Tasmania, Nick McKim, for the day's news. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Annalise.
Now, the big story today is the Greens' push for a federal ICAC. It's cleared the Senate, but we've heard very unlikely to make it to the House, maybe through the House. Is this just a stunt?
No, it's not a stunt, and in fact, it's a very critical piece of legislation that we've been campaigning on for well over a decade now. And as recently as last year, we had Labor in a Senate inquiry recommending that our bill be opposed. So we're really pleased that Labor's come on board. And the test now is for the House of Representatives. So that message will go down from the Senate to the House today. And we'll get an opportunity, and we will take that opportunity and move that the bill be debated immediately in the House. Now, in terms of whether or not it'll pass, look, some of the backbenchers, government backbenchers, have been making a few rumbling noises about the need for an ICAC with real teeth, and we'd only need one or two to cross the floor, and the Parliament could finally deal with and pass legislation to create an anti-corruption watchdog with real teeth and have it through the Parliament today.
That's a pretty extraordinary idea, that there'd be backbenchers who cross the floor on this. There's no funding in your bill. It can't, because it originates in the Senate. But that means it's quite unrealistic that it will happen from this bill.
Well, if the Parliament decides it should happen, then the government will have to make it happen. I mean, the Parliament is sovereign in this country, and we saw, for example, with the Medivac legislation that we initiated in the Senate, that ultimately there are times, if legislation
They were very
does
different
pass,
times, though.
They were very different times, and the numbers were balanced a little bit differently, not profoundly differently, but certainly significantly differently. But the point is that once the legislation is through, the government has to comply with it.
If we talk about Pauline Hanson's comments just a short time ago, she was saying that she abstained from the vote because while she supports a federal ICAC, she didn't like the way it was drafted. She didn't think that the really had enough teeth. What do you make of that?
Well, it's got the most teeth of any model that's currently been put before the Parliament. It's got more teeth than the principles that Labor have outlined. It's got certainly more teeth than the rhetoric we've heard from the Prime Minister and the government. Look, if Senator Hanson or One Nation want more teeth, we'd be really happy to have that discussion with them, because we think we've put forward a bill that does provide for a federal anti-corruption watchdog with the teeth it needs to ensure to the best of its capacity that there's no corruption or malfeasance in the Commonwealth public sector and in Parliament.
Now, when it comes to drug testing of welfare recipients, Jackie Lambie's really holding her position with the government, demanding more funding for treatment before she would support it, but she does seem like she's not going to really support drug testing of welfare recipients at all. Have you spoken to her about this?
No, I haven't, but obviously being from Tasmania, we do have conversations from time to time on various issues, but I think Jackie's been very consistent in terms of the position that she's taking about what people are talking to her about. And look, I get around in Tassie as well, as does Jackie, and people in Tasmania are talking about health, they're talking about climate change, they're talking about fires, and we've seen some of the fires burning in Queensland. We had them in terrible fires in Tasmania last summer. They're talking about the housing crisis, where we are one of the most unaffordable places to live in Australia relative to income. So those are the bread and butter issues that people are raising with me in Tasmania, and I agree with Jackie, drug testing of welfare recipients just not on the agenda.
The government's given this data to the Daily Telegraph, $65,000 in funding is going to these people to help them with drug rehabilitation services. Surely that's a good thing.
Well, ultimately, we don't support on principle drug testing of people on welfare.
Is that cutting your nose to spite your face?
No, it's not. I mean, and of course, on principle, we support significant extra investment into treatment opportunities for people who have the health problem of drug addiction. So, yeah, we don't see why, for example, welfare recipients should be drug tested when there's plenty of doctors and lawyers who also receive significant public funding, politicians, political staffers. No proposal to drug test any of us from the government.
Now, you have a bit of family news that seems to have escaped the headlines out of Tasmania, that these new laws have come in that people can change their birth certificate to reflect what they feel is their true gender. Yeah. And your stepson's been one of the first to do that. He
has, and it's been a really happy time, I have to say. So my stepson, Jasper, is a young trans man, and Tasmania was the first state to change the law, which allowed Jasper to go in and change his sex on his birth certificate without having to have an operation and have a hysterectomy. So it's a change in the law that really means almost nothing to the overwhelming majority of people, but for the people it does change things for. And I've seen this with Jasper, it just changes them in the most profound way imaginable. And he has gone from, a confused and angry young person into the most beautiful, brilliant young man, and this law change has been a really important part in that process because it ultimately says that the bureaucracy and government, and by extension community, actually accepts him for what he is, a young man.
Pretty vehement opposition to this change in Tasmania, other states saying it would never happen, and it was just, I think it was week before last that sign came up in the PMC toilet block saying that the Prime Minister, it was unnecessary for people to use the bathroom that they felt best matched their gender. There's a lot of opposition to this in the general public. What do you make of that discussion?
Well, in terms of, the sign in PMC, I reckon fair to say there's a lot bigger challenges facing the country right now than what kind of signs exist outside the toilets in Prime Minister and Cabinet. And look, I understand some people get really hung up about, who goes to the toilet where. When I talk to Jasper, my stepson, about this, and look, Jasper is a young man, looks like a young man, passes for a young man, got a beard. He just says, where do they want me to pee?
Yeah.
Do they want to walk with a beard, looking like a bloke, into the women's toilets? And I reckon he's got a really fair point there.
Certainly no easy answer, is there? Well, Nick McKim, thank you for sharing your family news and other topics of the day.
Thank you.